Well, I gave you all these bad things that Russia had done to China, which are they're not small things. And then isn't the problem with communism is that the economics of it don't actually work? And that fundamentally these two countries are continental powers. They're continental empires, and sure they change out ideologies. The ideology of the Czar changes out to communism, and China is changing out Confucianism for communism. But the principle that each one should be king of the roost, that hasn't changed. And that would be a mutually exclusive proposition.
That is such a good point. I can't speak of Russian culture or how they got here, but I do think there is a reason for the success of the Chinese Communist Party in China. We have a long history of accepting tyrannies, emperors. I don't think it's such a novel idea to think that we still, in a way, live in an imperial China right now. And the Chinese authoritarian regime is more stable than all the other regimes that we know, partly because we've developed this culture, political culture, whatever, around this political structure. For example, over the years, for thousands of years, Chinese people have been taught to respect conformity, to value obedience. You know, you have to obey the authority. These are all code for good virtues. In ancient Chinese culture, we do have this notion that everybody is the same. I think this is where a lot of confusion happens because a lot of people mistake conformity with equality. I think that's why communism is so appealing to Chinese people. The idea that there is no class, it really does sound like some sort of ancient Chinese philosophy. But I think I'm starting to see more people in the West are accepting these lies, including that Harvard graduate speech that I made a video about a few months ago.
Of who's going to run uh, Asia and then Eurasia, right? Because they have a shared address, right? This long border.
Hmm.
And also, communism, you're supposed to have a whole, it's supposed to take over the whole world, right? And we're supposed to have a classless society, right? And that's why we don't even worry about governments and things because they're eventually going to melt away.
Another thing that I think is really important is Sarah Paine talks about the expansion of communism. Communism is supposed to, it's like a cult. You are supposed to ask the whole world to accept communism. That is also very much in line with the mindset of a Chinese emperor. What a Chinese emperor means when they say unity, what they mean is like, I'm gonna conquer this land, I'm gonna conquer that land. The ultimate honor for these Chinese emperors is to amass as much land as they can. And that also, it sounds very communist. You know, the whole world should accept communism. I want to turn each one of them under me. There's so much overlaps between communism and imperialist thinking.
Well, that's all nonsense. And as things go on further and further, you have dictators more and more entrenched, and they're using communism, which is another piece where it's just amazing about the big lie. I don't know whether Stalin said something. If the lie's big enough, people will believe you. That it's just so out there, it's so preposterous. They go with it, which is this notion that the Soviet Union is that it's the West or these imperial powers, right? And we buy this, that they're not the ones. But if you look at it, I've given you the data.
I mean, we transition from imperialist society to one party authoritarian regime. I don't know, like it's not that much better. I mean, is it even better? I don't know. Like, because in ancient China, there was no technology. The control that the central government had on its people is very much limited by physical distance. But now we're under more control.
In our own time, this lie about, oh, it's the West, it's NATO expansion. This explains Putin. I've given you the data. It's nonsense. It's now why
I see that a lot in my comments. This is one of the favorite arguments used by Chinese bots and the Chinese Communist Party. that is to blame the West. And I think they're capitalizing on the will of the good people. If you're a good person, you're always thinking, oh, maybe I did something wrong. Maybe there's something I could work on. And they're counting on that. I'm not saying like, the West is always the best, that there's no flaw or whatever, but it's just so infuriating to see authoritarian regimes like Russia and China. They use that against you, they use your goodwill against you, and they absolutely take no responsibility whatsoever. Nothing that they ever did could ever be wrong. They must be the victim or a careless mistake, an innocent mistake. They absolutely does no self-reflection or anything like that.
The Russians feel obliged to take other people's territory. Part of it is this feeling good while other people squirm. There's that aspect. And they're not the only people who do those sorts of things. But it's also from this being on the plains of Eurasia over history, people have invaded you. And so you have an established paradigm of how you deal with other people that is deep seated over thousands of years. So I can't totally answer the question because there are a lot of Russians and a lot of Chinese whose decisions together aggregate to what they do.
So I want to understand, say, Stalin's decisions in particular in the case of telling the communists during the Chinese Civil War that you can go below the Yangtze River so that he can split up the Chinese and the communists and the nationalists in China and leave China weak. So we know from all the actions in Stalin's life that he was a devoted communist, right? He does collectivization and almost destroys his regime because he's a devoted communist. At the same time, and so communism says that there has to be this worldwide revolution at some point. If there is a worldwide revolution, there will be other powerful communist countries. So that's implied in the nature of what a worldwide communist revolution is. But at the same time, he doesn't seem communist enough to want China to become fully communist. He cares more about real geopolitics. Tell me about how.
Well,
I love that question. I simply love it. Yes, that is the hypocrisy of communism, or their interpretation of communism. Like I said before, when they say it's classless, everybody's the same, and when Xi Jinping and that Harvard graduate say like we're all people, or 人类命运共同体, that means humanity for all. I think there's a mismatch between what they actually mean by that and how people understand it. I'll give an example. There's a Chinese saying. It means 普天之下莫非王土. It basically means under heaven, we are all king's land. All the lands belong to the king. There's a layer of conformity there. We're all the same. And that's, I think, like communism, or their interpretation of communism, it's the same. You're all communist, but you're communist under me. And yes, they're mutually exclusive. That's the fundamental difference between democracy and, I think, autocracy.